Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of They Lied About Africa. I'm your host, Numbe. Today, I'm bringing on a guest whose work stopped me in my tracks, y'all, the moment I found it. Her name is Awa Seck, and she has this rare ability, right, to use a camera not just to capture a moment, but to expand it to turn the ordinary into something sacred. There's a humility in her perspective, almost like she knows the camera is bigger than her. She doesn't force stories, she listens through the lens. And in doing so, she reminds us that creativity isn't just about being artistic. It's about being brave enough to see, to imagine, and to preserve what others might overlook. And what drew me to Awa isn't just her eye for beauty, but the way her photos carry weight. They speak of heritage, of connection, of memory. The whisper truths about Africa and the diaspora that don't need long explanations. You just feel it as soon as you see them. So, in this episode, we're not just talking about photography, we're talking about what it means to reclaim our stories visually, to capture culture with care, and to see the world through the eyes of a young creative who's carving her own path. So let's get into it. So, Owa, thank you once again for joining me. I know who you are, but for those who are listening who might not know you yet, I want you to give you the chance to frame yourself in your own words. Can you introduce yourself? Who are you and why photography has become the space you choose to show up in?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Numis, so much for having me on the podcast. I'm Owa, of course. 19 years old. I was born and raised in Harlem. And I of two Senegalese immigrants. They came here in like the early 2000s. I think ever since I was younger, I've always been interested in arts. So with like dancing, singing, musicals. But as I got older, it kind of evolved into more visual art. And so I think that's why photography became the best medium for me and being able to like artistically express myself. But yeah, I picked up my first camera when I was studying abroad in London. It was my friend's camera. It was a Canon M50. And then from there, everything kind of just like clicked. It was very like instantaneous. So I think that's kind of like what drew me to photography the most, being able to craft a story or be able to tell the stories of whoever it is that's on the opposite side of the camera. But that's like a little bit about me and why I chose photography.
Mm, that's so cute. I love that. What was the first thing you took a picture of when you were in London?
Okay, so I took pictures of like the streets
Yeah.
because it was like our tourist sightseeing day. So I took pictures of kind of like the streets. I find like the architecture there so beautiful. Like any type of
Mm-hmm.
street photography, honestly,
I
I was
agree.
really drawn to. So I was just like, this is amazing. Like this is so pretty. Let me take a picture of it. And like the first few pictures were blurry, but I liked how like the camera fell in my hands. I don't, it's like a very indescribable feeling. And I feel like every time I say this or like talk about it, people are like, I feel like I sound corny, but it
Girl,
genuinely is like
no.
one of those things like music playing in the background. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just you and the camera. That's how it feels for me. And
Yeah.
what I was like taking pictures of when I first started.
That is so beautiful. No, I love that. I love you were able to find yourself in photography and it just felt right. I feel like some of us nowadays, we kind of just jump into certain crafts or certain careers even because that's what society tells us to want to do or that's what our family tells us to do, which sometimes there's nothing wrong with that, but it's so rare nowadays you find someone coming across doing something that they genuinely love because they've had an experience where they felt it and they accepted it rather than pushed it away. So I really commend you for that. Now, something I really love about your work is that your social identity comes through clearly, right? Africa, diaspora, womanhood. But I also know like the person behind the camera matters just as much. And I think a lot of people in the diaspora struggle with that balance. So, who they are publicly versus who they are privately. So, for you, what has your creative journey looked like so far? And how does who you are outside of just labels like come into play when you're creating these projects?
Yeah, I would definitely say in the beginning it was kind of like muddy for me. I
Yeah.
think because the only people around me, at least like within the community that were doing photography, I'd see them do lifestyle. So it's just like, okay, like somebody's getting cute, you just take their picture. And for me at first it was like, okay, whatever involves me being behind the camera, I'll enjoy. But I think over time I felt lost and I felt suppressed. The creative ideas that I had, the fun shoots that I wanted to do, I felt like weren't being reflected in the kind of photography that I was going into. And so that's why I kind of like literally like a few months in, like midway, I kind of had to like start over. But I wouldn't really call it starting over and like, going back to square one. I'd kind of call it like a rebirth, like a refresh, because I think for as long as I'm living on this earth, I'm ever changing. And so are my interests and however else I want to portray myself. And so that's what I felt like it was. I think internally I was changing and I wanted to be more intentional and personal about whatever it is that I was putting out there, whether it was my relationships, the way that I spoke, the way I presented myself, and by extension, my work, because it is an extension of myself. So that's kind of where I made that shift. And I was like, you know what do I want to put out there? What do I want to capture? I want to capture me, but I also want to capture where I come from and the things that have inspired my interest in photography. So I think that's kind of where like shoots like the beach shoot that I did, and the shoot that I did with Abdullah, his name is Abdullah. He had like a soccer in his hand. I was very inspired by kind of like my cultural identity, but at the same time, not solely basing it off of that and kind of, placing it in like a cool alleyway, showing where I grew up in the city. And all of those things kind of like pieced together and was able to be shown in the final product. So I think that's like kind of where my creative vision is headed. Really just putting whatever out there that comes to mind or what resonates with me, and it doesn't have to be fully grand boubou, jesner bazin, like for you to know that, okay, this is an African photographer, but bits and pieces of it, like maybe the pattern on the person's clothing or like a necklace that I chose will be really, really small and intricate detail, but it means a lot and it adds to the story that I'm trying to tell. So I hope that like answers the question. I'm like going on a tangent.
No, no, I love that. That answers that beautifully. And I just want to know, like, for instance, we'll get into it a little bit later. Like one of the images that you took of a young man, and the flag on his back with the soccer ball underneath his foot. It was so beautiful to me how you were able to combine both your American identity and your Senegalese identity in an image, and just it. I didn't grow up in New York. I did grow up in Massachusetts, but seeing that, I felt so seen in a way that I can't describe. But I wanted to know, like, a little off topic, or a little, we're gonna segue a little bit away from what we were talking about, but what was your relationship with not the continent of Africa, but the country of Senegal, and your upbringing in New York, when, like, throughout your whole life? Like, did you, I know you were born here, right? But how often did you go back home? How often did you stay there? And for how, like, what's the period of time that you would stay there? So just about like your traveling back and forth and how much exposure you got of Senegal growing up.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because I've only been to Senegal twice in
Huh?
my life. Yes. It's like, oh my God, I really want to make like I want to change that, but I went once when I was 3. That was my first time, and I stayed there for 7 months. And then when I came back, all I knew was Wolof. So I started like preschool right afterwards, and then I learned English, and then literally from that moment up until I think I was 17. The summer going into my freshman year of college was my second time going back. And I would really say that that was my first time because I was old enough to remember. But to be very honest, like that trip literally changed my life. Like no exaggeration, it really did because I think when you grow up in the West and you know like where your parents are from and you have bits and pieces of culture that are like introduced to you, you haven't fully had the chance to like assimilate into that culture because you haven't been in the environment. You recognize the songs, you know some of the lyrics, but you don't really know what they mean and why the person is singing it or like, how significant certain cultural traditions are until
Yeah.
you go there and see for yourself. And so I think that's what happened with me when I went to Senegal. And I think it also showed me a side of Africa that definitely wasn't portrayed in the media that I was consuming at least. Like, I never considered living there until I went and I was like, wait, what? Like they're living, it's really nice here. Um, and obviously I am very privileged to visit there and be able to like afford the good sides. But I think even in the parts, because my family is not like rich, like back home. I know some people have that here, but we were kind of like we were like in Cambarin, kind of like a little like ghetto-ish part. I'm not gonna say like it's the worst, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
even in that environment, I felt like I belonged. It
I
felt
love that.
so warm all the time. Like people that you've never seen in your life, but they're just so welcoming and there's such a strong community there. And so I
Yeah.
think that really just kind of like clicked in me and something was like, yeah, I'm coming back here. Like I have to live here. Like I don't think America is for me, going back kind of just feels a little empty. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that feeling whenever they come
Yeah.
back from going home. But yeah, literally up until that point, like I didn't really care to understand Wolof. I knew it. I was one of those people that understood it but didn't speak it. But
No
coming
facts.
back, all I was watching was Senegalese shows. I was speaking Wolof with my
Yeah.
parents, people like really picked up on it too.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's kind of just like my relationship with like my cultural identity and being back home. Not everything clicked until like I went there and saw it for myself.
Yeah, no, I find that so beautiful. It's so funny. I went to Senegal a couple times, only myself as well. But the first time I went, I was a little much older than you were. It was 2012. So I was 10 turning 11 that year. And I went for like 30 days, but also the best trip of my life. And it changed the way I saw the world. And like to that day, to this day, because of that trip that I took, like everything that I do is so intentional and just connects me back to the motherland. And because of that trip, like every single year, I was like, I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back. And like, I just consistently kept going after that. And it's connected to why I started this podcast. Like, just seeing that at such a young age, seeing how you grow up, and being raised in a household where your parents are Senegalese, but then you go outside and you see something different. For once, it wasn't that two-way street. Like you are in Senegal, being raised with Senegalese cultural values, and then you go outside and it's the same thing. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't that
Yes.
back and forth, and I loved it so much. And like, yeah, sometimes it's just that one trip. That's all it takes. And yeah, I'm so glad that you experienced the same thing. So I want to pivot back to the question. So you once wrote that picking up a camera made the world feel so big. Like it taught you humility, realizing how much you don't know. That's something I think a lot of us in the diaspora can relate to. Like when you're in between cultures, you're constantly learning and unlearning. How has photography changed the way you see Africa, identity, or even yourself, not just as an artist, but as a person in the diaspora?
Yes. I think honestly, kind of going back to that feeling in where when you have a camera in your hand, you're quite literally forced to look through a different lens.
Mm.
When you're learning about photography, you're learning about composition, color theory,
Yes, I love color
lighting,
theory.
how important all of those different things are. And you think like, okay, whatever, yeah, yeah. But it literally changes the narrative of a story. Like I remember I was explaining a light concept to somebody and I was like, yeah, if you want it to look more dramatic, it really just depends on what kind of story you want to tell. Like if you want it to be soft, if you want it to be harsh, pay attention to the shadows. And I think it kind of like translated in the way that I would kind of like look at pictures from like Senegal or like Africa or back home. So before I was just kind of like, oh my God, like this cute, it's whatever. And then you really like dissect the picture. That's like what I do for fun. I just stare at pictures and study them. You dissect the picture, the image. You're like, oh my God, the photographer was really intentional in how they placed the subject and why was it in this specific background or area? How does that add or take away from the story that they're trying to tell? And so I feel like, I don't know, it makes you like notice like damn, like a lot of what you see is very intentional and is built up upon hours and hours and hours of pre-production and work that's going into the image. And so it just made me more appreciative of like a lot of the African art that I saw. And I also think that like understanding that I'm more influenced by my cultural identity than I realize. So I think that also made me feel a little bit more small and like humble. Like it's not just you, Awa. It's you, Awa, your mother, your father, your sister, like all of those people that came before you, your family members back home. It will be like certain concepts that come to mind. Like I had like a shoot idea featuring hair. Where did that idea come from? My mom grew up doing hair. She was a hair braider. She had a hairstylist. I'm ñeño. So a lot of the women in my family do hair. That's like literally one like small thing that you think isn't really connected to like your cultural identity, but is. It plays a huge, 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 huge part. So yeah, I think those things kind of just like, wow, there's a lot to take in and a lot to value and understand when it comes to like approaching photography, especially when you want to be intentional about it. Because I think it's less about just like snapping whatever and whatever is pretty to you. It's also what's important to you, what's influenced you, what's influenced your life decisions. You know, it could be as small as like a tree,
Mhm.
as small as a little droplet. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? So, yeah, I think that's kind of where that like statement came from. Really like forcing myself to stop looking at myself in the mirror and whatever and looking through the camera lens and the world around me and trying to like pay attention to the small things. So, yeah, I think
No, I love that. You know, I wish what you just said a lot of people would take much more consideration into when it comes to like Instagram and things of that sort, because I feel like it's become a platform where people are just posting professional photos, and like I even like myself stopped doing that and just started taking pictures of like things that are around me, that represent me. Like for instance, I'll take pictures of sunsets because it makes me feel fuzzy and warm, or like a page of a book I'm reading, or a small moment in time of, and it just has so much to say. I feel like in a world where it is so hard to have conversations now with depth or meet people with depth, I think like photography is the one thing that that if you don't use it in depending on how you use it, you can contribute to that or you can pivot from that. um but no, I find that so beautiful. I appreciate you for sharing that. But in a lot of African communities, I want to mention, I know art, whether it's like music, photography, or writing, it can be seen as risky or even like a taboo path. I know I've heard people in like our community say things like, "Oh, that's not a real career. You can't make a living out of that," you know. And at the same time, people often underestimate the amount of actual work that goes into it, like you were mentioning, especially when it comes to like planning, styling, directing. So, I know you're also in school, if you don't mind talking about what you're doing in school right now, but have you ever experienced that tension yourself? And why do you think it's important to take photography seriously as a way of telling our stories?
honestly, I'm going through that tension right now because I feel
Mm,
like I picked it up in February. I feel like I
wow.
even forget that myself, but
Yeah.
it was only like a few months ago. And this summer, I think provided me with a lot of free time and space to really like just creatively put myself out there. Also because of the free time I had during summer break. But being back at school now and it's like junior year, so stresses of like internship and
Oh, yeah.
breaking into the corporate world. I'm a finance and analytics major, so all that math, statistics stuff. And then it's kind of like both sides of my brain are kind of battling each other, the left and right side with like creativity and wanting to express myself and artistry, and then the left side where I have to be very analytical and logical in the way that I'm thinking about, okay, how am I going to set up my future? You know, because I am second gen, so I have to, even though I'm in America and I have access to higher opportunity, I'm still the child of immigrants. So they want a life that is better than
Most
what they
definitely.
had. You know what I'm trying to say? Like you want to have that financial security and stability in your life, but at the same time not compromising your passions and your interests. And so interestingly enough, I think I've been trying to really just find that balance. Even like with my finance and my corporate job, I don't want to just become another number working at a company here. I want to be able to one day open my own consulting firm back home in Senegal. So it's always just like kind of like, what purpose do you have in this life and how can you go about achieving that purpose? And I think hand in hand it goes in with photography as well. Um, it might not be the most stable career, but I love it and I'm passionate about it and I care about it. So I don't care if like, I'm doing a bunch of shoots for free. As long as I know that like I'm able to put my art and work out there and it's gonna touch somebody
That's
and
all
I
that
can look back
matters.
on the work and be like, I'm really proud of this. I really
Yeah.
love the story that this tells. I'm okay with it.
That
And
is
I
so
think like
beautiful.
even this summer, like when I made the switch from like a lifestyle to more creative projects, my mom would ask me, she's like, "How much are they paying you?" I'm like, "Nothing." I was like, "I put this together myself." She was like, "All right." Like I could tell like she was probably like, girl, like what happened to the money? Like, I want you to be able to find stability." But it's like I find stability in my artistry, in my craft, and putting myself out there. So I'm okay with it. I'm content. And I think when it for any like African creative that wants to start something of their own, you have to ask yourself, what are the reasons why I'm doing this? Is this for money? If it's for money, I promise you, you're not going to be happy because it's so inconsistent and there's so much work and effort that goes into it. But if you really, really love what you're doing, it's not going to matter. And it's going to come like eventually when believe, Allah will place the money and the barakah into it in the time and place that it's supposed to be in. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, yeah, that's just how I feel.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel like a lot of people who are first gen, especially whose parents are immigrants, they deal with that as well. You understand that your parents make so many sacrifices. You understand that, they done broke their backs to get you where you are right now. And it's like every single thing that you do, you are trying to repay them. You are trying to make them proud. But then it sometimes feels like when you, I guess, are trying to pursue something that doesn't pay well or doesn't bring money to the table, it feels like you are fighting with yourself. Like you're having an internal battle because like you care about your parents, you want to take care of them, you want to kind of participate in this rat race society that we're in, and work your 9 to 5. But then it's about also, how can I contribute to this without losing a part of myself, But I think it all is about balance, like you said, balancing your 5 to 9, seeing how you can incorporate your passions into your everyday life. Because then, in a way, like your passion, it's what makes you happy. And if like you're not taking care of yourself, like you won't even be able to do that first 9 to 5. But no, I appreciate you for sharing your testimony, and I really, really resonate with that. But I do understand also like every creative journey, even me starting this podcast, it has its highs and its lows. And I know a lot of people in the diaspora who want to start creating, they get stuck in those moments of doubt, wondering if it's worth it. I've had many of those questions in my head myself. Can you share a moment where you felt stuck or maybe you questioned yourself, and how did you move past it? And then on the flip side, like what's a moment of pure joy that reminded you like this is exactly what I want to do?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was definitely kind of like midsummer
Mhm.
when I was making that switch with my style and what kind of work I wanted to put out there. So I was working on like the beach shoot with Muhammad and Amina, and like it was like 3 weeks of preparation. I went to like the African market on 116th. I'm looking for the jewelry pieces. I'm texting the models. I'm trying to figure out like, okay, where's the location gonna be? Just stressing over all of these little details. And at the same time, I'm like doubting myself. I'm like, what if these pictures don't even come out good? Like, what if
Yeah.
they're just trash? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
That's so
what if this
valid.
is all just like for nothing and I've wasted all this time and energy and the energy of the
Mm-hmm.
people involved?
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, like answering like this the second part of the question, literally at the shoot, it like everything flowed so beautifully. Like everything came together. I obviously had the vision and I knew I had a vision, but I think sometimes when you're trying to execute the vision, you get lost in it because there's so many different factors that are coming into like making sure that the final product turns out the way you want it to. And I think a lot of the times, like just creatives in general, we get lost in the process of creating, and not valuing the creation itself. Even if it doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to be, you still put it out there and you still accomplish something. And so I think that's really what I felt. I felt a very great accomplishment at the end of the shoot, looking at the photos, reflecting back. And it's one of my favorite shoots to this day, not because of like how it looks, but because it was kind of like the first of many, and the first kind of like step towards really like transforming into the photographer that I wanted to be. So yeah, I think like yeah.
No, that's beautiful. I love it. And part of me part of what inspired me to start this podcast is that, mainstream media, right, always paints Africa in the same narrow ways, whether that's poverty, safari, war. I feel like your work pushes back against that by showing the beauty in everyday life and culture. So when you hold your camera, what truths about African life, womanhood, or diaspora do you feel most compelled to preserve, reclaim, or resist against?
That's a really good question. I think probably fashion
Mm,
speaks
yeah.
to me the most. Really, really, really love fashion. The clothes, the textures, the colors, the details that even like the hairstyles too. Like literally can make like a whole segment about that. But I think fashion the most is what speaks to me. Um, yeah, it's what I grew up seeing, the big buzzins, how much work goes into like making those pieces, the artistry and hands craftsmanships of the tailors, so
Yes.
much talent there
Yeah, a
as
lot of
well. So I
talent.
feel most compelled to kind of like capture that and hope that like eventually in the future I'll get big enough or reach brands into where they'd want to work with me. African
Inshallah,
designer
one day.
brands would want to like,
Yeah.
inshallah, would want to work with me, and I can be able to like capture their pieces and stories in the way that, they want it to be captured. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, so much work goes into fashion. I started trying to sew myself, and it is one of the most difficult projects that I've ever picked up. And I literally commend the tailors, especially back home, so much for their work. But it's crazy how their work is not recognized as enough, and I'm glad you have picked up your camera to kind of show that, and bring it to light. Now, one thing that excites me about your story is that you're still experimenting, right? You're exploring portraits and editorials now, but you've talked about wanting to move into landscapes and fashion photography. I think a lot of us can relate to not wanting to stay in just one lane. Where do you see yourself headed creatively, and what kind of projects excite you for the future?
Yeah. Honestly, for right now, I've really been into like wanting to get into fashion photography and editorials. Only thing is it's a little tricky because it's also compromising with like my deen and religion. Like it really depends like what type of clothes are the brands trying to sell. Like a lot of the times it's not like modest. So I've been thinking about that a lot more. And so that's why I kind of like also was drawn to landscape photography, and I guess work in or street photography as well, capturing everyday life, that I feel like is reflective of like my cultural and social and personal identity. So yeah, definitely would want to like do fashion photography in a way where like it's not compromising my deen and my like, religious values and personal beliefs, but at the same time still validating my passions and my interest in that industry in that world, because I do think that there are like a lot of really cool, amazing African and modest wear brands that you know are meant to be captured and need photographers and need work with like being pushed out there. So I would want to be a part of that movement, that wave. And then on the other side, I think just like landscape really speaks to me a lot more nowadays, like capturing sunsets, beaches, nature. Like I find myself looking more at those pictures when I'm like scrolling on Instagram or whatever. I think it's Allah's creation is so beautiful. So being able to capture that, that's like amazing, being able to travel, visit different cultures, cities, people, and capture them as well with like street photography. So yeah, I think probably as I get older and when my professional like financial career kicks off and I'm able to create my firm back home in Senegal, I probably wouldn't have as much time to be in fashion photography or commercial photography, but I could do street or landscape, or I could possibly open up my own studio and create a space for other creatives in Dakar or
Yeah.
back home for them to be able to like explore their interests as well. So
That is so beautiful, and I can see like the fire and the passion like through your eyes, and I cannot wait to see what you achieve, and I'm just excited for you and like all of those things that you're going to do on the ground back home. Like we need more of that. Um, so I hope this resonates with a lot of people. If you're listening, go build something back home. Come on now. But to close, but to close, I want to zoom out a little bit. If one of your photos or many of your photos were shown 100 years from now or two generations after you as a record of who we were, what story would you want to tell? And what would you say to young Africans who feel the pull towards art, but they're too afraid to pursue it?
It's a very like beautiful question. I think I'd wanted to tell the story of my current generation and community, the ones that weren't born back home and don't fully have that African cultural experience, but were raised with cultural values, religious values instilled in them. And it's kind of like when you are not African American, sorry, but like Senegalese American, you identify with both parts and both cultures side by side. You have a different experience than the ones from your parents. And so I try to make sure that I'm able to like capture that as well. Like you said, with some of my um some of my pictures having both my American and Senegalese identity present in my work, I want to be able to tell that story when people look back at my pictures years from now. And I think for anyone that's considering getting into the creative space, specifically Africans, I would 100% say do it. You know, you're always going to be thinking of what if I did this, or what if I could have done that, or you don't want to let your thoughts consume you and not be able to
Sure.
put them into practice, or make it a reality. It's just going to leave you with regret, and you never know how much you can grow with a hobby. I feel like I've really, really grown as a person. I feel like sometimes I don't even speak as much anymore because I just try to let my photos speak for me. Feel like I can't even properly portray or contextualize whatever it is that I want to say or whatever it is that I'm going through, but a photo might. So I think it's like you don't know what bits and pieces of yourself that you can find through art and through creativity. And it doesn't have to be photography, it can be painting, it can be designing, it can be sewing. I think really just do it. You really, really, really should just do it and put yourself out there. You don't know who you're going to meet and who it resonates with. So, yeah.
And that's a wrap on today's conversation with Awa Seck. What I love most about her work is that it doesn't just show us images, it asks us to slow down, to feel, and to remember. She's proof that art is not a luxury, it's literally a responsibility to witness, to reclaim, and to tell the stories we refuse to let slip away. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this episode, it's that creativity is power. Not power in the loud, flashy sense, but in the quiet, instance of refusing to let others define how Africa or the diaspora should be seen. Thank you to Awa for reminding us of the beauty in our heritage and the courage in capturing it. If you want to check out her work, the link will be in my bio. And thank you for listening, because every time you tune in, you are choosing to see Africa through a fuller, truer lens. I'm Numbit, and this is They Lied About Africa. Until next time, keep questioning, keep imagining, and keep reclaiming the story.